We're going to assume that, yeah. Yeah. This would be the rotation. How many years would you grow a forest and then regrow it? Absolutely. This is like a plantation. This is like you're growing trees. There's no ecological values here. This is just growing stock to harvest for fiber. Sure, it would be clear cutting. Yeah, it's not like a wild pristine western forest. It's like a plantation forest that you clear cut and replant. It's like pine in New Zealand would be a good example. Eucalyptus trees, something where we don't have a big ecological value. You're just growing the single equal age stand of trees. Very limited model. So we have some fisheries model that we went through too. And this has two parts to it. First, there is so there's a stock and a growth. So there is some population. There's just going to be some population dynamics curve here, and it's going to have a few different points to it. First is this is with no harvesting. This would be the equilibrium up here. You could call this the carrying capacity. This is the highest stock. This is the stock with no harvest. There is the highest growth rate here, so we usually call this the MSY, maximum sustainable yield. Right? So this is the population is at the biggest amount. Births equal deaths. This is the amount that the forest would naturally have in some sort of wildlife. It's the amount of deer that are out there. If you start harvesting the deer, you can get a lot more deer growing or some sort of game that you are having growing. In fisheries, this is with nobody fishing at all. This is the full amount of the population of fish the ocean can support. This is where the resource is growing at the fastest rate. Every year, this many more fish are being added to the population. So for at this point, when we stop fishing, the fish will grow until they get back up to carrying capacity, which is how much the resource can support. For a lot of big animals, we'll have this thing called minimum viable population size. There's some point where we fish them down to a really low level that the fishery growth rate goes negative and the fishery crashes to zero. They go extinct. They can't find each other to mate. Somebody come in here? We went through, I'm not going to go through all the steps, but we go through, there's a whole set of steps that we can take and then put this into, put a fishery into yield and effort. So yield, so we take the amount that we're catching times some market price, and so we have some sort of yield in dollars per ton or something, dollars we can get, and then we have effort. So if we put effort in there, number of boats that we send out. So now we're putting how many fishing boats to put out there. So yield per unit of effort. This is solving the fishing problem. So this population model will still be implicit in this yield versus effort thing. And in the effort curve, we're going to have two things. The more effort we're going to put out there, we're going to have a cost curve for effort, and there's going to be a yield in effort. Yield, effort. How many fish we're actually going to get for putting that many boats out there. There's a couple important points for us to get on these. First is this point where profits go to zero. So our costs are equaling our yield. We're fishing so hard that this is a zero profit point. There's going to be this point up here at the maximum yield, or there's going to be some sort of point where this is going to be like reflecting the slope here. This would be like a monopolist point, a single owner point. I made that so messy. Okay. And this point would be the point that maximizes profits. This is a point where if we could have an efficient fisheries regulation, you would have more income per boat that's fishing. You would have less boats, you would have less employment, but you would have better employment for the people in fisheries, and you would have the right amount. And you would have a healthier part of your growth curve here. You'd be somewhere in here on this growth curve. So let's just say for our renewable resource, we have a single owner at this point, and at this point we have what's called open access. At this point, profits, we can think about this in our supply and demand. This is profits are driven to zero by market entry. More and more boats come in. Less and less money is being made by each fisherman or by each boat. Profits are driven to zero. We get to too many boats being out there, and we get to we get dangerously to lower and lower stock levels. If we're here, we have a healthy stock level, high growth rate, and we have a single owner, which we can do this total allowable catch. We'll distribute to the boats the ability to land fish. It's a healthier fishery. I think I need to finish up here. I've got a couple more. So this is the last couple lectures. We did what's called the environmental Kuznets curve. So here we had levels of pollution, and here we had GDP per capita. So we talked about GDP. It's a measure of the wealth of our societies. It has a lot of problems in it. It doesn't price natural resources in it. It doesn't price environmental pollution to it. So GDP is something that environmental economists would like to change the way that it's measured. But anyways, we can look across societies and across time. And this Kuznets curve is an idea that there's some kind of curve like this. It was originally done for income inequality. The original Kuznets curve was saying that people start out relatively equal. They had high industrialization where they had lots of inequality, and then later they had progressive governments and they had lower income inequality. We're not thinking so much about that now as income inequality increases. But let's stick to pollution. So here you have low income, low pollution. In the middle, you have medium income and high pollution. And then we're getting out here, we have high income and lower pollution. So we could say this could be Africa, a whole bunch of rural people, millions of farmers living out in the country, less industrialization per capita. Here we could have China. Here we could have Europe, just to be on some stereotypes. We could look at different types of pollution and where is this turning point. So people have actually measured when does this turn down, at what level of growth it turns down. Looking at Europe in the 20th century, there's sulfur dioxide for the US, we've shown that it's gone down to the level of 1900 in the United States. So our cities were full of soot and coal. Now it's a relatively less common problem. Europe was thick with fog 150 years ago. Now it's Beijing that's thick with smog. Right? There's a lot of problems with this, but certainly right now when I was talking about carbon, the US and China are right up here at the top, China in the middle income, US with the high income. What's it going to take for the US to turn down and what's going to take for China to turn down in terms of their carbon per person or carbon per unit of GDP. And then there's one last one that's not in the book, but that I did in class, and this is thinking about carbon. But I think it relates to the class because it's the cost for abatement. Right? So chapter 11, chapter 12, we can go like this and we can say marginal cost of abatement, right? So this is sort of basic to this class, is this sort of marginal cost of abatement. Where's the efficient point? Where's the dead weight loss? So I'm going to, oh, I forgot that I can't erase. Interesting that the computer doesn't handle erasing. All right, so we have a couple things. First, the interesting thing about the cost per abatement curve is it has 0 in the middle of it. And I forgot to plug in. Abatement, there's a lot of things that have negative costs that could reduce carbon. And that's a curious thing that we don't expect to happen out of this curve, but there's a whole bunch of efficiency things that will pay off in the long term, and we don't actually need to subsidize them. We just need to figure out how to get people to subsidize them. The other thing about this curve, like we do in chapter 12, is we could say we have some goal, some total amount of carbon abatement we want to get to, right? We want to get this amount of carbon abated, right? We have a Kyoto Protocol goal. A lot of these are get to 1990 levels in 2020 or something like that. They're fuzzy, they're not moving around, but we want to get some level of abatement. We want to clean up the amount of carbon. So then we rank all of the different possible things we could do to reduce the amount of carbon that we're emitting. And so importantly, we now have the width of those mattering because the width is tons abated. CO2e abated. And this is the cost per ton CO2e abated. So this is, again, always our dollars per quantity and our quantity, but we'll think a little more formally about what that means here. And then we have the width. So we have sorted all the possible things we could do to abate carbon, and we were ranking them. So we'll figure out, that's just crazy that just did that. If we want to get to this goal of abatement, we can read off here what sort of price per carbon would get us to that goal. Right? And we're starting to think about what price per carbon we want to have, what sort of price per carbon we can start, what are the burdens, what's the dead weight losses they're going to create. So carbon price, in California we've started a cap and trade, so it's trading at $10 right now. But maybe we need to get up to $50 or $60 to get some big impacts. If we really want to solve things, we might have to get $80 or $100 on a global scale, with everybody paying that price, not just certain sectors. Right? And then importantly, we'll think about these activities. Down here we have a whole bunch of efficiency activities. We have insulation, we have more efficient heating and ventilation systems, we have LED lighting. All things that would pay for us to do them now, but we don't do them for a whole bunch of missing reasons. We have fuel efficiency of cars. Let's just put miles per gallon. I forgot that I can't erase. We have miles per gallon. Up here in the middle, we have sort of things on land. We have pastures, we have forests. Did you have a question? You want me to keep on? Zero price? What's the zero? This is on the price scale. This has a negative cost, like you would actually just come out ahead if you did it. Anyways, this doesn't need a carbon price to be worth doing. Anything where the price is positive, you think you need a positive carbon price to encourage it to happen. It's just interesting when they do this. There's like a whole bunch of activities that are worth it to us because it would end up costing us less. If we installed LED light bulbs and had more efficient heating and ventilation and more efficient cars, we could do it right and would pay off for everybody without it requiring any subsidies. Anything above here is like we need subsidies or prices on carbon or cap and trade tradable permits. Back to the activities though, we want to know some more of these activities. So in here, there's some renewables. We're currently deploying photovoltaics and wind at some positive prices. We have some ways to encourage them. We have reasons that we're going to do it. That's going to decrease our needs to have inputs on fossil fuels. Has a whole bunch of reasons that it helps us. And then we have up here this technology that we haven't figured out: carbon capture and sequestration. So this is keep burning fossil fuels, but figure out how to stick it in the ground. This is some big renewables. This is some big new renewables. Like this is like wind kites or these new ideas that they have for like something that's further out into the future. Big industrial scale renewables. And we can disagree and agree on where renewables are. So there's big debates going on where it's like if we figure out how to do coal and capture the carbon, is it going to end up lower cost than putting big renewable projects in? But this is where moving forward to deal with abating carbon more and more, we're going to have to face these. And certainly once you get a carbon price and an international price for carbon, what's already happened with the price for carbon is people in Europe were paying for carbon permits that were going to tree planting or reforestation projects. So they were buying a permit here for an activity that would be happening over here. And this will be something that's happening going forward. I need to wrap up because I think we should get out of here. If you guys have questions, or come to office hours on Thursday in 234 Giannini, and I'll work through some problems from the book. I don't have problems online. If you want to go to Peter Burke's webpage, there are like old finals and old midterms and stuff. If you go, it's Burke, and it's at are.berkeley.edu. And there's a webpage for this class. There's an EEP1 webpage that will have a whole bunch of links for old problems and stuff.